The stars had never looked so cold. Ambassador stood at the center of the bridge, his long bioluminescent tendrils dimming with each passing moment. Around him, his crew worked in terrified silence. Their crystalline ship, the Eternal Song, drifted through the purple haze of the nebula with 40 other transport vessels. Each ship carried thousands of his people, 2 million souls in total, scholars, artists, children, the last survivors of a dying world. And they were surrounded. The tactical display showed 300 red dots forming a tight circle around the convoy. Warships, Predator-class vessels with weapons that could tear through their shields like paper. They had no military. They had never needed one. For 10,000 years they had solved their problems with words, with trade, with careful diplomacy. Now, words meant nothing. "Ambassador," said his communications officer, a young female named. Her voice shook as she spoke. "The commander is demanding our surrender again. He says if we do not comply within the hour, he will begin destroying ships at random." Closed his 4 eyes. He had sent distress signals to every major power in the galaxy. The hegemony had responded with a formal message about territorial disputes and jurisdiction. The merchant syndicate had offered help in exchange for payment they could not provide. The ancient, the most powerful civilization in known space, had not responded at all. No one was coming. "How long until the attack?" asked. "Less than one rotation, Ambassador. Perhaps sooner if they grow impatient." Turned to look at the main. The ships hung in the darkness like hungry predators waiting for their prey to weaken. And his people were weak, so very weak. "There must be someone," he whispered. "Someone in this vast galaxy who will help us." Hesitated. Her tendrils flickered with an emotion could not read. Fear, perhaps, or something stranger. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "there is one species we have not contacted." "Who?" "The humans." The bridge fell silent. Even the soft hum of the ship system seemed to fade. Felt something cold move through his body. Every species in the galaxy knew about the humans. They were new to interstellar travel, having only discovered faster-than-light technology a few decades ago. But in that short time, they had built a reputation that made even the uneasy. Humans were strange. They were emotional creatures who laughed and cried and screamed in battle. They ate the flesh of other animals and found pleasure in physical combat. They kept predators in their homes as companions. They formed bonds with anything and everything, sometimes even with machines. But the most disturbing thing about humans was their unpredictability. No one could ever be sure what they would do. They might help you. They might ignore you. They might decide you were their enemy for reasons no one could understand. Dealing with humans was like handling an unstable explosive. You never knew when it might go off. "The humans are dangerous," said. "Everyone says so." "Yes, Ambassador, but they are also the only ones who might come." Looked at his crew. He saw the fear in their eyes, the exhaustion, the fading hope. He thought of the 2 million people in the convoy behind him, the children who would never grow up, the artists who would never create, the scholars who would never discover. He turned back to send the message. The signal went out into the void. It was a simple transmission, a plea for help, coordinates, a description of their situation. Did not expect a response. Humans were unpredictable after all. They might be too far away. They might not care. They might decide that they were not worth saving. The response came in less than 10 minutes. His eyes went wide. Her tendrils flashed bright blue with shock. "Ambassador, we have received a transmission. It is from a human vessel." "Put it through." The flickered, a face appeared. It was a human male with pale skin and dark hair cut short. He had scars on his jaw and around his left eye. His eyes were gray like storm clouds before rain. Behind him could see other humans moving around what looked like a ship's bridge. They were loud, busy. One of them was laughing about something. "This is Captain Danny Hawkins of the Defiant Promise," the human said. His voice was rough but steady. We received your distress call. What is your situation? Felt his tendrils tremble. He had never spoken to a human before. The creature on the screen looked so strange, so alien, and yet there was something in his eyes that could not ignore, something that looked almost like concern. Captain Hawkins said, "My name is Ambassador of the Collective. We are a convoy of 40 transport ships carrying 2 million refugees. We are surrounded by 300 warships. They will destroy us within the hour. No one else will help us. Please, I am begging you. If there is any mercy in your heart, come to our aid." The human was quiet for a moment. His gray eyes moved across the screen as if he was studying something could not see. Then he nodded once. "We will be there in 9 hours," Danny said. "Hold on. Do whatever you have to do to stay alive until we get there. Lie to them, stall them, anything." "Captain, you do not understand. There are 300 warships. How many vessels do you have?" Danny smiled. It was a strange expression. His teeth showed, and for a moment he looked like a predator himself. "Enough," he said. 9 hours, Ambassador, just hold on." The transmission ended. Stood frozen in place. Around him his crew exchanged uncertain glances, approached him slowly. "Ambassador," she said, "do you think they will really come?" Did not know how to answer. He had seen something in that human's eyes, something fierce and determined and strangely kind. But 9 hours was a long time, and one ship against 300 seemed impossible. "I do not know," he admitted, "but for the first time in days I feel something I had forgotten." "What is that, Ambassador?" Looked at the stars no longer seemed quite so cold. "Hope." The convoy continued to drift through the nebula. The ships circled like hungry animals waiting for their prey. And somewhere in the vastness of space, a ship called the Defiant Promise was racing toward them, carrying humans who had decided that strangers were worth saving. The true beasts of the galaxy were coming. And they were coming to help. 9 hours felt like 9 years. Ambassador had done everything he could to stall He had lied about engine failures. He had pretended to negotiate surrender terms. He had invented technical problems and communication delays. But the commander was growing impatient, and his threats were becoming more specific. "Your time is up, Ambassador," Vex growled through He was a massive creature, covered in black scales, with 6 eyes that glowed red in the dim light of his bridge. His claws clicked against the arms of his command chair. "Surrender now, or I will begin destroying your ships one by one, starting with the smallest ones, the ones carrying your young." Felt sick. His tendrils had gone pale with fear. Behind him was crying quietly at her station. "Please," said, "just a little more time. We are preparing the surrender documents. Our systems are old, they are slow." "You are lying," Vex said. "I can smell deception even across the void of space. You are waiting for something, but nothing is coming. No one cares about your pathetic species. You will die here, Ambassador. You will all die here." A soft alarm began to sound on the bridge. One of Vex's officers turned to speak to him in their harsh, clicking language. The commander's 6 eyes narrowed. "What is this?" he hissed. "A ship has dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the nebula, a single vessel." He let out a sound that might have been laughter. "So someone did come after all. One ship, against my 300, how delightful." The split to show the newcomer. Saw a vessel that was small by galactic standards, perhaps half the size of a destroyer. It was gray and angular, with sharp edges and weapon ports visible along its hull. The name was painted on the side in the human language. "Defiant Promise." Vex opened a channel to the human ship. His voice dripped with amusement. "Attention, human vessel. This is Commander Vex of the Swarm. You have entered a restricted military zone. Leave now, or you will be destroyed along with these refugees. This is your only warning." For a long moment there was no response. Then the screen flickered and Captain Danny Hawkins appeared. He looked exactly as he had 9 hours ago. Calm, steady. The scars on his jaw seemed to catch the light from his bridge. "Commander," Danny said, "I received a distress call from the convoy. I am here to escort them to safety." Vex's laughter echoed through both bridges. "One ship? You cannot be serious. Look around you, human. I have 300 warships. You have one. Even your insane species cannot be foolish enough to challenge those odds." "I am not here to challenge you," Danny said. His voice was quiet but firm. "I am here to take those people home. You can let us pass or you can try to stop us. The choice is yours." Behind Danny, other humans were moving around the bridge. Saw the woman with short hair that Danny had called Kate. She was smiling in a way that made uncomfortable. There was also a large man with dark skin named Grant, who appeared to be eating something while he checked weapon systems, and a smaller woman named Amy, who was running her fingers over a blade while monitoring her screens. These humans did not look afraid. They looked eager. "You are mad," Vex said. "All of your species completely mad." "Maybe," Danny agreed, "but we are also stubborn, and we do not abandon people who ask for our help." "Then you will die with them." Danny tilted his head slightly. That strange smile crossed his face again. "Commander," he said, "I told you I was not here to challenge you. I never said I came alone." Space behind the defiant promise began to ripple. Light bent and twisted as more ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Counted them as they appeared. 1, 5, 10, 17. 17 human vessels of various sizes and types. Some looked like military ships, sleek and dangerous. Others appeared to be private vessels modified with weapons. One ship was marked with symbols that indicated it was a hospital ship, but even it had gun ports visible along its sides. And then the defiant promise's hull began to open. Dozens of smaller craft poured out. Boarding pods realized, each one carrying human soldiers in powered armor. "We heard there was a fight," said another human voice on the channel. "This one belonged to a woman on one of the other ships. We came to help." "The Iron Mercy standing by," said another voice. "The Last Horizon ready for action." "Solar Wind checking in. Tell us where to point our guns, Danny." Captain Danny Hawkins looked at the commander. His gray eyes were hard as stone. 17 ships, Danny said. 300 boarding pods with 2,000 Marines, and about 400 very angry humans who really do not like bullies, still want to do this the hard way. Vex's scales had darkened. His red eyes burned with rage, but could see something else in them now, something that looked almost like doubt. "You are still outnumbered," the commander said. "We will crush you." "Maybe," Danny said. "But how many of your ships will we take down before you do? 20, 50, 100? Are you willing to sacrifice that many of your people to kill a few refugees?" "I am willing to sacrifice anything for victory." "Good, so are we." Danny leaned forward in his chair. His smile was gone. His face was serious now, almost grim. "Here is what is going to happen, Commander. In about 30 seconds, my ships are going to start moving toward that convoy. We are going to escort them out of this nebula. You can let us pass and nobody has to die today, or you can try to stop us. And if you do that, I promise you something." "What?" Danny's voice dropped low. It was almost a whisper, but somehow it carried through the channel with perfect clarity. "We will not stop. We will not retreat. We will not negotiate. We will fight until every single one of us is dead. And while we are dying, we will take as many of you with us as we possibly can, because that is what humans do. We protect the people who ask for our help, no matter what it costs us." The channel went silent. Watched as the human fleet began to move. 17 ships against 300. It seemed impossible. But as he looked at the faces of the humans on his screen, he realized something that made his tendrils tremble. These creatures were not afraid to die. They were afraid to fail. And that, understood, made them more dangerous than any predator in the galaxy. The first missiles flew at exactly 9 hours and 14 minutes after the distress call. Commander Vex had chosen violence. His 300 ships surged forward in a massive wave, their weapons lighting up the darkness of the nebula with streams of plasma and bursts of energy. He expected the humans to scatter. He expected them to run. Every species in the galaxy would run from those odds. The humans did not run. They charged. Captain Danny Hawkins sat in his command chair with his hands relaxed on the armrests. Around him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency. Kate was calling out enemy positions and coordinating with the other ships. Grant was firing weapons with a steady rhythm, his face calm despite the chaos around them. Amy was redirecting power to shields and engines, her fingers dancing across her console like she was playing an instrument. "Hard to port," Danny ordered. "Put us between that destroyer and the convoy." The Defiant Promise turned sharply, sliding into the path of incoming fire. The ship shook as plasma bolts struck their shields. Warning lights flashed red, but the crew did not panic. They simply worked harder. On the other ships, the story was the same. The Iron Mercy took hits to its forward section and kept firing. The Last Horizon lost a weapon array and compensated by moving closer to use its remaining guns. The Solar Wind had a hull breach on Deck 3, and the crew sealed it off while the captain continued issuing orders. But the real horror came from the boarding pods. Lieutenant Grant had left the bridge to lead the assault. His powered armor made him look like a metal giant as he crashed through the hull of a destroyer. Behind him came 50 Marines in similar suits, their weapons hot and ready. They were waiting for them. They were fearsome creatures, standing nearly 8 feet tall with claws that could cut through steel and venom that could paralyze prey in seconds. On their own world, they had been the ultimate predators for millions of years. Nothing had ever challenged them. Nothing had ever made them afraid. Until now. Stepped through the breach and immediately shot 2 guards before they could react. His team spread out behind him, moving in pairs through the corridors of the enemy ship. They communicated with hand signals and short grunts. There was no hesitation, no fear, just cold, efficient action. A warrior lunged at a Marine named Tanner, claws extended, ducked under the attack and drove his armored fist into the creature's chest. The flew backward and crashed into a wall. Before it could recover, another Marine named Cross put 2 shots into its head. "Keep moving," ordered. They pushed deeper into the ship. More came. Some fought with claws, others used weapons. One managed to bite through the armor of a Marine named Pete Shaw, injecting venom into his bloodstream. Pete staggered but kept fighting, his movements slower but still deadly, until 2 of his teammates dragged him to cover. Cross stood over them, firing at anything that moved. Her voice was steady as she called out targets. 3 on the left, 2 coming from behind. Watch that doorway. They kept coming. The humans kept killing them. On the bridge of the Eternal Song, Ambassador watched the battle through the tactical display. He could not believe what he was seeing. The human ships were taking damage. Some of them were badly hurt, but they refused to retreat. They refused to stop. And the boarding teams were even more terrifying. They had access to security feeds from some of the ships. What they saw made their tendrils go pale with shock. The humans fought like demons. They screamed as they attacked. They laughed when they were hurt. They taunted their enemies with insults and challenges. One human Marine, a woman named Grace, had lost her weapon in close combat. Instead of running, she had grabbed it by its neck and thrown it into 2 of its companions. Then she had picked up a piece of broken metal and used it as a club until she could retrieve a gun from a fallen enemy. Another Marine, a man named Victor Santos, had taken a claw strike to his leg. He had simply wrapped the wound with emergency bandages, injected himself with painkillers, and kept fighting. When his squad leader ordered him to fall back, he had refused. "I can still stand," Victor had said. "That means I can still fight." On the defiant promise, a plasma bolt finally broke through the shields and struck the bridge. Sparks flew everywhere. 2 crew members were thrown from their stations. Kate was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but she was already back at her console, calling out new orders. Danny Hawkins stood up from his chair and walked to the weapons station. One of the officers there was unconscious. Danny pushed him gently aside and took over the controls himself. "Amy, get those shields back up," he said calmly. "Working on it. Give me 30 seconds. You have 15. Amy laughed. It was not a nervous laugh. It was the laugh of someone who was enjoying themselves. "You always say that," she said. 14 seconds later, the shields came back online. In the medical bay of the hospital ship Gentle Mercy, a woman named Bates Santiago was treating wounded from across the fleet. Her hands were covered in blood, both human and alien. She had been working for 6 hours without rest. Her eyes were red with exhaustion. A medic had been sent to observe and assist. He watched in amazement as Bate moved from patient to patient, stitching wounds, stopping bleeding, restarting hearts. She never stopped. She never slowed down. When one patient died despite her efforts, she closed his eyes, whispered something soft, and immediately turned to the next one. "How do you keep going?" they asked. "How do you not break?" Bate looked at him with tired eyes. There was sadness there, but also something else, something hard and unbreakable. "Because if I stop," she said, "someone else dies, and I refuse to let that happen." She turned back to her patients and kept working. Outside, the battle continued. The swarm was larger and stronger. Their ships were more powerful. By every measure of military strength, they should have been winning. But the humans would not stop fighting. And slowly, terribly, they began to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. They had thought humans were just another species, another group of prey to be hunted and conquered. They were wrong. Humans were not prey. They were something far more dangerous. The battle had been raging for 11 hours. Commander Vex stood on his bridge and stared at the tactical display with growing disbelief. His fleet had suffered losses, significant losses, 43 ships destroyed, dozens more damaged. Boarding parties had been wiped out on 8 of his vessels, and still the humans kept fighting. How was this possible? They were the greatest warriors in their sector of the galaxy. They had conquered 17 worlds. They had crushed species far more numerous and advanced than these primitive apes from a backwater planet. Their soldiers were bred for combat, enhanced with genetic modifications that made them stronger, faster, and more deadly than any natural creature. But the humans would not stop. Vex had studied warfare his entire life. He knew that every species had limits. The body grew tired. The mind lost focus. Fear crept in and destroyed discipline. The often called the greatest fighters in the galaxy could maintain peak combat effectiveness for approximately 3 standard hours. After that, they needed rest. The humans had been fighting for 11 hours without pause. On the defiant promise, Captain Danny Hawkins was still in his command chair. He had not slept in over 30 hours now. His eyes were bloodshot and his movements were slower than they had been at the start of the battle. But he was still alert, still giving orders, still leading his crew. Kate had taken a 15-minute rest period 2 hours ago. She had eaten a quick meal, closed her eyes, and then returned to her station as if nothing had happened. She was now coordinating attacks across the entire human fleet, her voice calm and steady despite the chaos. Grant had returned from the boarding actions with wounds on his arm and side. He had spent 10 minutes in the medical bay, received treatment, and gone right back to the bridge. He was now at the weapons station, methodically destroying fighters with precise shots. Amy had not left her engineering console for the entire battle. She had solved 17 critical system failures, rerouted power through damaged conduits, and kept the ship running through pure force of will. When Danny asked if she needed a break, She had simply smiled and said she would sleep when the job was done. This was what they could not understand. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the fastest or the most intelligent. Their technology was relatively primitive compared to the ancient races, but they had something that no other species possessed in such abundance: endurance. On the human, their ancestors had survived by hunting prey across vast distances. They did not outrun their targets. They outlasted them. They would chase an animal for hours, sometimes days, following it relentlessly until the creature collapsed from exhaustion. This was called persistence hunting. It was a strategy that required incredible stamina, patience, and determination. Humans had never stopped being persistence hunters. They had simply changed what they hunted. Ambassador had accessed his people's historical databases to understand what he was witnessing. The information there confirmed what he was seeing with his own eyes. Humans could maintain physical and mental activity for extraordinary periods. They could function on minimal sleep. They could push through pain, hunger, and exhaustion that would incapacitate other species. And they did it through sheer willpower. The swarm was starting to crack. They had expected a quick victory. Their battle doctrine was based on overwhelming force and rapid strikes. Ambush predators by nature, they attacked with explosive violence and expected their prey to die quickly. Extended combat was not part of their strategy. But the humans would not die quickly. Every time the thought they had won, the humans came back. Every damaged ship that should have retreated instead repaired its systems and returned to the fight. Every wounded Marine who should have stayed down got back up and kept fighting. It was like battling ghosts. No matter how many times you struck them, they kept coming back. On the flagship, officers were reporting problems throughout the fleet. Crews were exhausted. Ships were low on ammunition. Morale was collapsing. Soldiers who had never known fear were starting to hesitate before engaging human targets. Word was spreading through the swarm. Stories of human ferocity. Tales of Marines who kept fighting with fatal wounds. Reports of pilots who crashed their damaged ships into enemy vessels rather than retreat. Recordings of humans laughing as they charged into certain death. They had called humans insane. They were starting to realize that insanity could be a weapon. Commander Vex received another report. 3 more ships lost. The human fleet was now actively pursuing damaged vessels, chasing them across the nebula, never letting them escape to repair and return. They were hunting his hunters. Vex felt something he had never experienced in his entire career of conquest and slaughter. He felt afraid. "Commander," one of his officers said, "the fleet is asking for orders. Should we withdraw?" Withdraw, the word tasted like poison in his mouth. They did not withdraw, they did not retreat. They conquered or they died. But as he watched the tactical display, watched his ships being destroyed one by creatures who simply refused to stop, Vex made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "All ships," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "fall back to defensive positions. We will regroup and reassess." The order went out. The fleet began to pull back, creating distance between themselves and the human vessels. For the first time in the battle, there was a pause in the fighting. On the defiant promise, Danny Hawkins saw the enemy movement on his screen. He knew what it meant. They were not retreating yet, but they were no longer advancing. They were tired. They were confused. They were afraid. He turned to Kate. "Status of the convoy." "All ships intact, Captain. No casualties among the refugees." Danny nodded. He allowed himself a small smile. "Good, now let us finish this." He opened a channel to the entire human fleet. His voice was rough with exhaustion but steady with determination. "All ships, this is defiant promise. The enemy is weakening. They came here expecting prey. Let us show them what happens when prey fights back. Press the attack. No mercy, no retreat. We do not stop until those refugees are safe." The human fleet surged forward. The hunt was not over. It was just beginning. The swarm broke at the 17th hour of battle. It started with a single ship. A destroyer that had taken heavy damage turned away from the fight and accelerated toward the edge of the nebula. Its captain had decided that survival was more important than victory. That one act of cowardice spread like a disease through the fleet. Within minutes, dozens of ships were fleeing, then hundreds. Commander Vex screamed orders into his communication system, demanding that his captains return to formation. But no one was listening anymore. The great predators of the swarm were running away from 17 human ships and 2,000 Marines who simply would not give up. Captain Danny Hawkins watched the retreat on his tactical display. Around him, his crew sat in exhausted silence. Kate had finally stopped coordinating attacks. Grant had put down his weapons. Amy was leaning against her console with her eyes half closed. They had given everything they had. And they had won. "All ships," Danny said into the fleet channel. "Stand down, let them go." There were sounds of protest from some of the other captains. They wanted to chase the fleeing enemy. They wanted to finish what they had started, but Danny shook his head. "We did not come here to destroy we came to save that mission is complete. Let the survivors run. Let them tell their people what happened here today." The human fleet formed a protective circle around the refugee convoy. Damaged ships limped alongside the transports. Medical shuttles flew between vessels, carrying the wounded to the hospital ship for treatment. The battle was over. Ambassador requested permission to board the Defiant Promise. Danny granted it without hesitation. When stepped onto the human ship, he was not prepared for what he saw. The corridors were with damage. Scorch marks covered the walls. Emergency patches covered holes in the hull. The smell of smoke and blood hung in the recycled air. This ship had been through hell and survived. And the crew looked even worse. Humans sat slumped against walls, too tired to stand. Some had bandages wrapped around their heads or arms. Others had the distant stare of people who had seen too much death. In one corner, 2 Marines were holding each other and crying quietly. No one seemed to think this was strange. Found Captain Danny Hawkins in the medical bay. The human leader was sitting on a bed, while a medic removed a piece of shrapnel from his leg. His face was pale and drawn. He looked like he had aged 10 years since their first conversation. But when he saw, he smiled. "Ambassador," Danny said, "glad to see you are safe." Did not know what to say. He had come with a prepared speech about gratitude and alliance. But standing there, looking at this exhausted, wounded human who had risked everything for strangers, words seemed inadequate. "Why?" finally asked. "Why did you do this? Your people died today. Your ships are destroyed. We cannot pay you. We have nothing to offer you. Why would you sacrifice so much for people you have never met?" Danny was quiet for a moment. The medic finished his work and moved away. The human captain looked at his wounded leg, then at the chaos around him, then at. "You sent a message," Danny said simply. "You asked for help and nobody else was coming." That is not an answer. Other species would not have come either. They would have calculated the risks and decided it was not worth it. Why are humans different? Danny considered the question. He seemed to be searching for the right words. "Do you know what makes humans dangerous, Ambassador? It is not our strength. It is not our technology. It is not even our stubbornness, though that helps." He paused. "It is that we feel things deeply, intensely. We form connections with everything around us. Other humans, animals, plants, even machines. Once we decide that something belongs to us, that something is ours to protect, we will die before we let it be harmed." "But we are not yours," said. "We are strangers." "You were," Danny agreed. "But the moment you sent that message, the moment you asked for our help, you became our responsibility. That is how humans work. We do not protect people because they deserve it or because we will be rewarded. We protect them because they need protection, because it is the right thing to do. Felt something shift inside him. He had spent his entire life studying diplomacy, learning to understand the motivations and desires of different species. Every species wanted something: resources, power, territory. Humans were supposed to be simple creatures, driven by basic instincts and emotions. But this was not simple at all. This was something profound. "You are not what we thought you were," said softly. "No," Danny agreed, "we never are." Later, returned to his own ship to prepare his report to the Galactic Council. He sat in his quarters for a long time, trying to find the right words to describe what he had witnessed. In the end, he wrote this: "We called for help when no one else would answer. The humans came, they fought, they bled, they died, not for payment, not for glory, not for any gain we could understand. They did it because we asked, because we were in danger, because they could not bear to let strangers suffer when they had the power to help. I have spent my career studying the species of this galaxy. I thought I understood the nature of sentient beings. I was wrong. Humans are not what the galaxy believes them to be. They are not primitive. They are not simple. They are the most complex creatures I have ever encountered. They are predators who have learned to use their aggression in service of compassion. They are pack animals who have expanded the definition of their pack to include anyone who needs them. They are terrifying. They are beautiful. They are like nothing else in the universe. My warning to the Council is this: do not mistake human kindness for weakness. Do not assume that their willingness to help means they can be controlled or exploited. The same creatures who rescued my people from certain death would burn entire fleets to protect what they love. Do not threaten what humans have chosen to protect. Do not harm what they have decided to defend. They are the true beasts of this galaxy, and they have decided to be kind. But make no mistake, the kindness is a choice, and they can choose differently." The message was sent across the galaxy. It was translated into 1,000 languages. It was debated in councils and studied by scholars. And everywhere it went, species looked at the humans among them with new eyes. The true beasts of the galaxy had announced themselves, and the universe would never be the same.